Hi, this is a quick overview video on how to play Robinson Crusoe, The Adventures on the Cursed Island. If you don't recall how to set up the game, then you should watch my setup video. The essence of the game is building, gathering, and exploring, but we'll get to that in a minute. The main phases of the game are shown in the upper left-hand corner of the board. There are 6 phases, but you'll skip the first phase, the threat phase, in the first round. A brief but detailed description of the phases is found on the round summary card, so you can see each of the phases in order. I won't go over every single detail of the rules, but we'll just show you very briefly how they work. So, as we said, we'll skip the first phase in the first round, that is the event phase, and we will go to the morale phase. If you're playing solo, at the beginning of the morale phase, you move the marker to the right one to increase your morale. You'll then take the number of determination tokens shown by the marker. So in this case, we would take 1 determination token. Next is the production phase. You look at your camp tile and you gain 1 wood or food depending upon the specifics of the tile. Place those resources in the available resource space. This is the future resource space. The next phase is the action phase, shown on the bottom of the board. The main actions are going to be build, gather, and explore, but you resolve the actions from left to right. Even though you resolve actions from left to right, you're most likely to actually do exploration first. So in this video, I'm going to cover things in the order that you're most likely to do them so that you can actually watch the video and pause it while you're playing the game. So Robinson Crusoe is a worker placement type of game. You will be placing your pawns in any one of the 7 action areas to decide what to do. So in this area here, you might use pawns to resolve a threat, or to go hunting, to build, gather, explore, rearrange your camp, or rest. In this example, we will use one of the character pawns to resolve a threat. We will use Friday to do some exploration, and we'll use another worker pawn to try to build an invention. When you use 2 pawns to resolve an action, it's automatically successful. In the solo game, we have the dog and Friday, so we could have used both of those pawns to do the exploration. However, I wanted to show how you resolve it if you are not automatically successful. Typically, you can only explore or gather in an area adjacent to your camp. However, you can go further if you use extra pawns. For example, if I wanted to explore this area, I would have to use 1 extra pawn because I have to cross 1 tile. The way to show this is to stack up your workers. So in this case, I have 3. 1 of them is for crossing this tile, and the other 2 are so that I can automatically be successful in exploring. Since we're only using 1 pawn, we have to roll the dice in order to see if we're successful. The different actions, such as build, gather, and explore, all have different colored dice. They have the same symbols, but they just have different probabilities. So if this is our roll, we're successful. The V kind of shape indicates that you're successful. Alternatively, you might see this symbol, and that means that you get 2 determination. So you're unsuccessful, but there's still some value. The heart shape indicates that you've been wounded. The question mark means that you have to draw a card from the adventure deck. Normally, you will not draw an adventure card if you're doing an automatic success because you don't roll the dice. However, if the action that you're attempting to do has an adventure token on it, as in this case here, you have to draw that adventure card no matter what. So you will just remove the adventure token and draw the card and do what it tells you to do. If you attempted to do the action with only 1 worker and therefore had to roll the dice, and if you rolled the question mark, it doesn't mean that you draw more adventure cards. You'll still only draw 1 adventure card and remove the adventure token after drawing the card. When you explore a tile, there may be any number of symbols on it. For example, the beast symbol, the totem, the shelter, and the discovery token. If you see the beast symbol, take the top card of the beast deck and shuffle it in with any other cards that are in the hunt action area. If you see a totem symbol, it's defined in the scenario. For example, in the castaway scenario, the totem has no effect. If the tile has a discovery token symbol, you'll place the discovery token in the future resources area. At the end of the action phase, you'll move those resources to available resource area. Some discovery tokens have just special shapes. So look on the scenario card to see what those mean. 3 final things to remember about the explored tile. The natural shelter means that if you've moved your camp to this tile, you have shelter already and you don't need to construct it. The terrain type is used for the inventions. Place a black marker on the terrain symbol for each invention that matches the terrain that you've just discovered. That means that the conditions for building that invention have been met. When you explore a tile, you do not collect the resources associated with that tile. Those resources are only gathered during the production phase or during a gather step. Building follows the same rules as exploration. When you have successfully built an invention, you place it in the future resources section. When attempting to build the shelter, roof, palisade, or weapon, then you make sure that you take into account the resources. For building a weapon, you need 1 wood, but for building the shelter, roof, or palisade, you need to use the table above, where the header shows you the number of players. For the solo game, use the 2-player column. If you built a shelter, you cannot lose it even if you move your camp. So place a black marker token to designate that the shelter has been built. Temporary shelters do not move with you when you move the camp, but the built shelter does. If you have built a roof or palisade around a temporary shelter, you will lose all of their value when you move your camp. However, if you have built a shelter, the roof and the palisade are reduced to half if you move your camp. When you attempt to build a shelter, roof, palisade, or weapon, and you're unsuccessful, the wood or resources are returned to the available resource section. If you are successful, then the resources are discarded. Resolving a threat can potentially give you a benefit and avoid a negative consequence. Resolving a threat doesn't have a risk of failure, so all it does is you have to place a worker there or 2 workers and potentially add some resources. In this particular case, we're using 1 worker to gain some food. To resolve that action, we place that food resource in the future resource section. We return our worker to the character card and discard the threat. The last 2 actions are rearrange camp and rest. In rearranging the camp, you don't actually rearrange anything, but you do collect 2 determination tokens and increase your morale. For resting, you increase your health by 1 by moving your health marker to the left 1. At the end of the action phase, the discovery tokens are moved from the future resource area to the available resource area. Now, the nourishing larva and the fallen tree must be converted into resources as soon as we move it to the available resource area. The other discovery tokens can be used at any time, so you can save them for later in the game. Throughout the game, you may be required to decrease the levels of things such as resources, or perhaps the roof or the palisade. If you ever can't do that, you lose 1 wound for each level that you can't reduce, unless instructed otherwise. The last 2 phases of the round are the weather phase and the night phase. These are described pretty well on the round summary card. Don't forget to increase the round counter at the beginning of each round. At the start of a new round, the first step is the event phase. The first thing that you do is draw the card and resolve the top portion. If the card has an adventure token icon, you place an adventure token on the corresponding deck. If the card has a book icon, you follow the rules described in the scenario. In the case of Castaways, the book has no effect. After resolving the top portion of the card, you bring it down and move the existing threat to the left and replace it with a new threat. If there is already a threat on the leftmost edge, it will move off, and when moving off, you will suffer the negative consequence on the bottom. Mystery cards. Mystery cards are used whenever the adventure cards tell you that you are to find a treasure, or you encounter a trap or a creature. To use the mystery cards, simply flip them over till you find the appropriate type. For example, if we're looking for a treasure, I will flip over the cards until I find a treasure symbol at the top. Once I do, I keep that card and resolve the effect. Fighting beasts. You may fight beasts because you decide to go on a hunt. Alternatively, a card may tell you to fight a beast, or you may have to roll the hungry animal die in the weather phase. When fighting a beast, you first compare the strength of the beast to your weapon level. In this case, the boa has a strength of 2 and the weapon has a level of 1. The character will take wounds equal to the beast's level minus the weapon level. So for example, 2 minus 1, the character would take 1 wound. Your character may have some things such as treasures or starting equipment that temporarily boost the weapon level. So these would be good for this one combat. So the old rifle, for example, will give you temporarily +3 for the weapon. So that would be a level of 4, and you would take no wounds. But then you would have to discard the card. Once you've determined the number of wounds to take from combat, then you reduce your weapon by the amount shown here. In this case, it's -2. In our case, we're only able to reduce the weapon by 1, so we take a wound for every level that we can't reduce our weapon. Any temporary boosts in your weapon level are not taken into account here. Next, any resources listed over here, such as food or the skins, are added to the future resource section. Finally, at the bottom of the beast card, there may be further instructions to follow. When a card or a hungry animal die directs you to fight a beast, you only use the beast's strength and compare it to the weapon level, and you don't gain any resources. So effectively, that just means it has a chance to wound you. So that's the basics of Robinson Crusoe. I hope you enjoy playing.